Access Fort Wayne offers reflections of our community. Production facilities provided by Access Fort Wayne are a service of the Allen County Public Library. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting organizations. For more information about creating your own television program with Access Fort Wayne, call 421-1250.
Hello, and welcome to our show, The American Veteran. I'm Dale Parrish, your host. Carl Fowler is the co-host, and our guest today is Walter Scare. Walt is also a Korean War veteran. He belongs to our organization, the Korean War Veterans Association. Welcome to our show, Walt.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning. When did you first join the service?
I joined the service in December 1950, and from there we went to, after doing a certain amount of paperwork before I left, then I went to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, which is south of Evansville, Indiana.
Yeah.
And from there I had our basic training for 12 weeks, and then I went from there to the West Coast to get on a ship, and for some reason or other I had a change of orders at that time, and I went to Japan instead first. And I went through another training session for 6 more weeks, which was in the Signal Corps.
Okay, and at Breckenridge you must have taken
heavy weapons.
Heavy weapons.
Heavy weapons training.
Okay.
Was my basic.
Such as?
50 millimeter handguns, or in other words.
Okay. Not artillery though.
No.
Okay.
No. This was heavy weapons, which was they set on a tripod.
Yeah.
And they fired from.
Okay. Basically, it was infantry.
Yeah, it was infantry,
training.
Heavy weapons, what they called heavy weapons.
Yeah. Okay.
You mean by heavy, you mean not only large caliber, but heavy to carry.
Yes, heavy to carry, right. Yeah.
I think we all experienced that, didn't we?
Yeah, besides the 30 millimeter, which is your normal rifle,
Yeah.
this was another rifle, only it was a 50 caliber, and it was heavier, and it was you had a tripod that you used with it, and it was pretty heavy kind of material.
Okay.
And then we also had mortars that we were trained on, which was these tubes that shoots a shell out into stationary positions.
How large were those? The mortars?
I don't remember the size of those, but they were.
Yeah, I don't know much about mortars.
And the mortars was like I had a tube about like 3 inches in diameter, and you dropped it down in there, and then you held your ears and waited for the
poof.
Really, I shouldn't say waited. It was pretty quick.
Then you went to in Japan. You had 6 more weeks.
And then I went.
Where was that at?
And at Itajima,
Itajima.
which was that island off of the east side of Japan, and we had a training then and related to pole line construction for telephone, and so that was to learn training about the telephone wire and the experience that goes with that, hooking them up, and also learning to climb the poles, and some of those poles were like 50 feet above the ground, and especially if you had a big span where you went across like a river, or overhead of getting over top of some buildings or something like that, where they had the big 50-foot poles.
Big tall pole.
Tall poles.
Climbed that with spikes in the belt.
And you learn to climb those with the spike in your belt,
They didn't use bucket trucks over there, did they?
No, bucket trucks weren't.
Run around.
I think they were pretty. I don't think I ever recall even seeing any of them.
It wasn't invented
I don't
yet.
think so.
Yeah.
Well, they probably was invented, but we didn't have them in our.
Yeah,
Well, in the early 50s, I don't recall seeing any either.
I
to be
don't
honest
think
with
so.
I think everybody at that time, pretty much, even locally, had climbed the poles with the spike, and because I remember my brother-in-law, he was worked with the power company, and he was a lineman for the power company.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you laid lines from where to where?
Our job after we got into Korea, after I had the training, first you get the training, and you had 6 weeks of that, and then when you go back into Japan, or Korea rather, and we went in at Busan, and then our training after we got there was to reconstruct the lines that were torn up from the fighting, the scrapping,
Yeah.
and reconstruct. And then there was times we had to go up to the front lines to put in ground, which was cable in the ground for the military people or the infantry people.
That would be from a bunker to a base, say, or
Right.
Yeah.
So we had that to work with that. So we would spend some time up on the front lines. Usually what it is, the way they had it worked out was we'd spend 6 weeks up on the front lines, and then we'd spend 6 weeks behind the lines, and then we would be rebuilding what was torn down from the military
fighting. Yeah.
fighting and using their
warfare.
Yeah.
heavy equipment and bombs and so forth.
Well, those mortars you're talking about tear up some lines.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of reconstruction.
I say the mortars he was talking about would tear up some lines too.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Sure.
See, a
would.
lot of back in them days, you still used open wire telephone communication. So you'd have a cross arm on top of the pole, and there'd be several wires separated by insulators from one pole to the next. And what we were doing though was using cable. So we'd start at a position and bring the wire into this little box, like electrical box, and then we do it from out of that in by cable. But the cable was elevated also up on the pole and tied up that way. We didn't trench them like they do today.
Yeah. I don't remember seeing any poles. Everything I saw was just laying on the ground.
Well, we did when we were up on the front line, that's what we did.
Yeah.
We just had them wherever. You
Just
just run
roll them off a spool and just lay them on the ground.
right,
Yeah.
laid them on the ground, laid them off the side of the road.
When it was blowing up, they just run another one. Nice.
Yeah.
Sometimes we spliced them if it was repairable.
Yeah, if you could find it.
If you could find the other end of it.
I remember between us and the forward observer, there must have been hundreds of wire. Just a mess.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Laid all in one place, and just once that was broken, all they'd have to do is, they'd have to run another one because they'd never find the one they was looking for.
Just an interesting little thought. Makes you wonder, well, what happened to all that wire after the war? Probably the Koreans salvaged all of it.
Sure it was.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
Because those people were pretty. They could find a way to use it somehow.
I think it was steel wire, wasn't it? I don't think it was copper.
I'm trying to remember. It was. I don't think it was steel. I think it had to have been an alloy.
Aluminum, maybe.
Pretty hard stuff, I know.
You know, they use aluminum.
It had to be something that we could bend pretty easily because I don't think it was steel. It may have been, but I don't think so because it was an insulated.
Yeah.
Because the cable, depending on at the front lines, quite often it was just two or three wires rather, in the cable that we used up on the front lines. But then when we were back from the front lines, where we had a cable with multiple lines in it, and bring it into a station someplace where.
So you was probably up there where there was a little action then off and on.
Yeah, off and on, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got your training in Japan in the communication field,
Right.
and then you went to where, Pusan?
Then from there we went to Pusan by boat, and after we get to Pusan, then we traveled by train part of the way up through the continent. Then after a certain length, we would get on the truck, and then they transported us on up to the front lines, and all of this was done at night.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
sure.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Right.
The driver would take you into your unit, introduce you, and that's where you stayed.
Well, I don't think I was even introduced. They pointed to me, there's your hole.
Oh, yeah.
Crawl in it and keep your head down, huh?
Yeah, you crawl in there and you make yourself known to everybody else that's in the bunker with you. We referred to them as foxholes, so I don't know what they call them now, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I dug in the side of a mound of dirt and
Well, when you're on the front lines that way, is that 24-hour duty? Is that it? Or do you have find time to sleep, or?
you just found time to sleep whenever you could, and yeah, it was pretty much like you say.
Because basically you're going to be awake during the day and you're going to pull watches during the night, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get all kinds of different routines of being called out, and this happens, that happens. Then when they moved the bunker, sometimes if there was a fight going on between the Northern Korean people and us, then sometimes we'd move up a little further, and they'd have to make new lines going up to that next bunker, and where they dug in at.
Sure.
You carried a carbine or an M1, or what'd you carry?
M1, carried an M1,
I'll be darned.
and
That surprises me.
Yeah.
yeah. Now, when we were behind the lines, we carried a carbine.
You carried a carbine.
Behind when we were back,
But when
reconstructing.
But when you went to the front, you had the M1s.
We had an M1 when it was on the front.
Okay.
Reissued, I don't know why, but we would be in our group or battalion, they would reissue guns for if he was going up to the front line.
Now, see, that's entirely new to me, because I thought the weapon you carried was indicative of the position you served in.
Yeah.
You know, truck driver or cook or artillery people like you and me, or whatever, they generally had carbines. The M1s was reserved for the infantry. They were fighting on the front lines. But like you say, if you was on the front lines, maybe that explains it.
Might have been needed.
It might have been.
I never, in my time, I don't recall ever getting in a position where I had to fire it.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, lucky.
I don't recall ever being in that sort of a position.
Times you had to use a foxhole, though, I bet.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get in there and wait till.
Did you come in contact with the North Koreans?
I
Or
never had
they
personally.
never charged you or anything?
I never been contacted or had contact with any of the North Korean people. It always seemed to be, in my time period, it seemed like we were going north, and our people from my group was involved in preparing the lines to the next foxhole, so we'd have communications.
Sure. Communication was the old ring up?
Oh yeah, the old ring up
Yeah.
phone. Yep.
Okay.
Call the next guy on the line.
No, they just cell phone.
How long did you serve up there on the front then?
Well, like I said, I was there. I was in Japan, or I mean in Korea. I was in Korea 13 months.
13 months. Huh?
And from the beginning to the end, we generally what they had our group battalion do is we would go like 6 weeks up on the front line, and then we'd come back, and then we'd do construction again, repairing old lines that was there by the Korean people, and then go back up on the front lines. And then the latter part of my hitch in Korea, there was fewer times that we went up on the front lines.
Okay.
It became less because they didn't move the bunkers, didn't move.
How long did they hold you at Pusan before they moved you on up? 3 or 4 days, something like that.
I don't believe we were held at all. As I think about it, I think we unloaded from the ship with our. We may have went through to the quartermaster first to get our. I don't recall that for certain, but it seemed like we maybe went to the quartermaster and got our material that we were.
Yeah.
Because we had our own duffel bag and our clothes and
Sure.
already assigned to us.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I could think of we would have been assigned, it would have been a gun, the
Yeah,
M1
I'm gonna say they'd had to give you a weapon.
because we come off of the ship and then we were loaded into the train. So I was thinking that we may have stayed overnight at that area, but I pretty much.
What I was getting at, I wasn't very impressed with Busan.
I don't recall being there long enough to even become acquainted.
We was there about 2 days, 2 full days, and I thought we was never going to get out of there.
Lots of dirt streets and so forth.
Well, we was more or less penned in.
What year were
fenced
you?
in.
What year were you there?
January '53.
53.
Yeah.
So things got quieter. So there was what I mean
Down
by
there
quiet.
it did, yeah.
Because in my case, I went there in 51, like April of 51, and they were still pushing north at that time yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they pretty much, as I best remember, they pretty much loaded us on the train, and we traveled by train. I don't recall anymore how far. It just seemed like it was quite a hike.
Yeah.
And then, then at the end of the line, they boarded us onto a truck, and you had all your gear with you, and then they'd stop here and there and let certain people, this guy off, that guy off,
Right.
and you go into and this during the night you had your bunker. So I don't know. I'm trying to remember if I even got any sleep that night.
Probably the excitement and everything, you wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, then if you did, was just a cat nap.
Well, you don't know where you're at. You don't know
Exactly,
which way
yeah.
the enemy is and all this stuff.
Yeah, you
It's
don't even know
dark.
which direction is north
Yeah,
at
you're
that point. Yeah.
You're just there in a hole in the ground, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're in a hole with a couple other guys, and at that particular time things was a little quiet. And I recall this one young man that had enlisted into the Army, and he had his mother sign his name, or sign for him, and he was supposed to be 18, and he was only 16, and he was a little bit disappointed in what he signed up for, and he was already asking to go home.
Well, he signed up to see the world, and he saw it, and then he was ready to head home.
Wasn't anything like home, was it?
No.
Interesting. It becomes quite interesting, when you've learned that, whoops, I don't think I want to be here.
Well, I think each and every one of us probably had a little case of homesickness when we was in the service.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you miss that familiar
Yeah.
surroundings, and you're out in the middle of nowhere and no place to go, and you don't know what it's all about anyways. So it's confusing and
Getting back to
disappointing.
getting back to when I was inducted into the Army, we went to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, and the base had been closed down for I don't know, since World War II. So we had to clean up, and so our own barracks, we had to clean up our own barracks before we could have a place to stay.
Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty common when they bring people into a camp that way. They put you into an unused section,
Yeah, that's what happened to us, and we were, like I say, had to first couple of days was scrub the place down and
Yeah.
Yeah.
move your bunk beds in, and so forth.
Wash the windows?
Yeah, we had to do that too, come think about it. I don't think we did that immediately, but the first thing we had to get done was get the barracks cleaned out and wash the barracks down inside, and that was one of the first jobs. And this sergeant that we had that was going to be our platoon sergeant, he was, seemed like he was, because we all were new guys, and so some of the guys weren't accustomed to having to do this kind of work, and so he was yelling at them and so forth.
Yeah, sure.
So
That makes you homesick quicker than anything.
that was interesting. And here I was born and raised on a farm, so I'm accustomed to some of these duties.
Yeah.
And
Yep, so was I.
Yeah, city boy.
okay, well,
Yeah.
I remember our barracks at Carson, Colorado, is where I stationed for 2 years before I went overseas. Anyway, those barracks was like a barn. You'd have windstorms, and barracks didn't even slow the dirt down. It just went inside and lit.
yeah, I think that's kind of the way those were in Camp Breckenridge. They had no insulation on the walls, and
No,
it was like
open studs.
make you think like you're sleeping in a barn, but we had to keep it clean, and
Sure.
they inspected us on a frequent basis, and it was interesting that these generals and people would come through, and they would have they could feel in different places that we kind of
Give you the white glove treatment.
yeah, there you go.
Wipe around, see if there's any dust. Yeah.
See that we'd done what we were supposed to do. Didn't use any shortcuts.
You say you was married when you went in?
No,
Oh, you was not.
no, I was not
Okay.
married.
Okay.
I was engaged, but I
Yes.
well,
Okay. What'd you do when you got out of the service? Go back to farming?
no. I had worked prior to me getting drafted into the military. I was working for an implement dealer, and there was in my family there was 3 boys, and I was the oldest. Well, there was altogether there was 7 boys, but in our family. But the ones closest to the helping on the farm was 2 other brothers below me. And so I had went to work for an implement dealer and as a mechanic or maintenance person,
Yeah.
and delivery boy, deliver the machines. And after that, I worked there 3 years, and then Uncle Sam had me for 2 years. And then when I came back, I had never worked in a factory, so I thought, well, I'll give this a try. So that's when I worked at what was known as Aircraft Gear out on West State Street. It was owned by Dana Corporation.
Yeah.
And they made engine parts for the engines military engines, or I mean I say military aircraft that the military used.
Yeah.
Yeah, they cut gears. Didn't
Right,
They?
cut gears.
Yeah.
I worked there like about 1.5 years, 18 months, something like that, till I got laid off.
Oh.
And then later they closed that up,
Oh.
closed that part of it up. And
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was military contract that they was working under, and after the Korean War was over, why they didn't need them anymore.
then, right, so that went away then, and
Yeah.
so was my first experience in working in a factory, and then after that I went after the aircraft gear thing, and then I went to work for the implement dealer again, and worked there another year or so, and I decided I wanted to get into something different, and went to work for a car dealer as a mechanic, and then later went to truck leasing company. Went to work for a truck leasing,
Oh.
which was known as Indiana Truck Leasing. I don't know whether you remember them or not, but they were here in Fort Wayne. Lafayette and Murray Street is where the shop was at.
Okay. Yeah.
And retired from that company.
Did
They
you?
later got bought out by Ryder Truck Rental.
Well, okay. Yeah.
And worked as a maintenance guy and moved up to being a shift supervisor and moved up to be the service manager of the shop, and later transferred to a couple other locations doing where Ryder bought out other truck leasing companies.
So they needed your experience,
Yeah.
expanding at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as you look back on your military service, you kind of proud you served?
Yes, at the beginning, like I'm like I think like many more young men that, geez, why do I have to do this,
Right.
And you're unfamiliar with it, but you look back at it now. I luckily went through my hitch with military and didn't get any injuries from it, and so I'm very proud of that. That it worked out that way. But some people, as you well know, don't
appreciate it.
don't.
Yeah. Do you feel like you contributed
Oh yes,
and
it was a good experience.
you learned a lot?
You learned a lot, and being out, and nobody. You have to wait on yourself.
Gives you that self-confidence. doesn't it?
Exactly, and
Yeah, we was fortunate. We only gave our time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We think of our brothers that didn't come back,
yeah,
and
and those that get injured and then have handicap after they get back home.
yeah,
Yeah. They're the ones that know that freedom isn't free.
they're our heroes, right?
Yeah. See, three of my brothers served over there as well.
Did they?
Okay.
One was in engineering. You know what I mean? Rebuilding the roads and reconstructing bridges and that kind of those things. And the other one was in he was in the medical department, and he was a litter barrier, and ended up getting a shell fragment in his leg when he was bringing a litter man, carrying one back.
Yeah. How long have you belonged to the Korean War Veterans Association?
I thought about that the other day, and I don't recall. My brother Al belonged, and he's the one that got me acquainted, but I don't recall how long I've been connected.
Huh. Yeah. I think I've been in there since '85.
You're one of the
I
old
believe.
timers.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get in. I was retired when I got in, so I would have that would have been probably like in the '90s for me.
I really didn't get active until last few years. So
Yeah, I got active in 2000.
was it?
Yeah, 14 years now.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We're out of time.
Oh, we're out of time.
Thank you for being on the show.
Okay.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
service, Walter.
I enjoyed it.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. Remember, freedom is not free. So if you see someone in uniform or some veteran that you know is a veteran, just walk up to them and say, "Thank you for your service. Thank you, and good night."